There is a question I have been asked more times than I can count. Women write to me and they say, I am not eating very much. I am trying so hard, but the weight, especially around my middle, will not move. And underneath that question is usually another one they do not say out loud. Why does this feel so impossible when it used to be easy? I want to talk to you today about something that took me a long time to understand myself. Not a diet, not a skincare routine, something quieter and older than both of those things. I want to talk about cortisol and about the 9 ordinary habits that the women I grew up around practiced every single day without ever once calling them stress management. Now, let me tell you something that stayed with me. The United States fitness industry is worth over $105 billion, and yet American women on average live 4 fewer years than Japanese women. I do not say this to be unkind to anyone. I say it because it tells you something important. The answer to aging well and staying slim was never inside a gym membership or a supplement bottle. It was in the daily texture of ordinary life. And at the center of that life was a quiet, invisible management of one hormone that most women in the West have never been told about in this context. Cortisol, the stress hormone. The hormone that, when it stays elevated day after day, tells your body to store fat directly around your organs, around your middle, regardless of how carefully you are eating. This is not a theory. This is what chronic stress does to the body physiologically. And the women I grew up around were not stressed in that chronic way, not because their lives were easy, but because of 9 habits so ordinary, so woven into the fabric of the day that no one ever thought to name them. The first one happened outside. In Japan, the women I grew up around walked. Not for exercise, not to hit a step count. They walked to the market, they walked to visit a neighbor, they walked through the park on the way to somewhere else, and they walked through trees. Chiba University documented in 2010 that 2 hours of weekly exposure to a natural forest environment, what we now call Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, reduced cortisol levels by over 12%. Japanese women over 60 average 8,000 steps outdoors each day, and almost none of them would tell you they were doing it for their health. She was not going to the forest for her cortisol. She was going because the path was there, and the air was clean, and she had somewhere to be. You do not need a forest. You need trees, and 20 minutes, and the willingness to leave the building. The second habit happened every single night, and it happened in hot water. The ofuro, the Japanese deep soaking bath, is not a luxury. It is not a spa treatment. In the homes I grew up around, it was simply what you did before bed. Water at roughly 40 degrees Celsius, a temperature that feels genuinely warm, not merely comfortable. You soak for 20 to 40 minutes. 80% of Japanese adults do this every single night. A review published in the Journal of Physiological Anthropology in 2022 confirmed that this practice improves sleep quality and meaningfully shortens the time it takes to fall asleep, particularly in winter. Why does that matter for cortisol? Because poor sleep is one of the most powerful drivers of cortisol elevation we know of. A body that cannot sleep is a body that cannot lower its stress hormones. A body that cannot lower its stress hormones stores fat. The bath breaks that cycle at its root. She did not call it stress management. She called it getting ready for bed. The language did not matter. The hot water did. The third habit is one that has no equivalent in Western wellness culture because it cannot be sold. Ikigai, your reason for getting up in the morning. Researchers at Tohoku University followed Japanese adults over 19 years and found that those with a strong sense of ikigai, a felt sense of purpose and meaning, had 30% lower all-cause mortality. 30%. Over 19 years. But here's the piece that almost no one talks about in the same breath. Chronic purposelessness raises your baseline cortisol. When you wake up and there's nothing that feels like it is waiting for you, your body registers that as a low-grade emergency, and a body in low-grade emergency stores fat around the organs, regardless of what you eat. No serum addresses purposelessness. No supplement replaces having something to look forward to tomorrow morning. This is the habit that cannot be bottled, and it may be the most important one on this list. The fourth habit happened at every meal, and it was taught in 4 words. Harahachibu. Eat until you are 80% full. My grandmother said it the way someone might say good morning, not as instruction, just as fact, as part of the rhythm of eating. And what I did not understand as a child is that she was not teaching discipline. She was preventing a physiological stress response. When you eat past fullness, your body treats it as a metabolic emergency. Insulin spikes. Cortisol rises to manage the spike. The body shifts toward fat storage. Every time. Researchers at Ochanomizu University found that men who consistently practiced harahachibu at 500 fewer calories per day than those who did not because they were dieting, but because the practice was simply how one ate. The remarkable thing is not the calorie difference. The remarkable thing is that no one was counting. The fifth habit was about where you ate and who you ate with. In the home I grew up in, food was eaten at the table, not at the desk, not on the sofa, not in front of a screen. The table was where the family sat together, and the table was the only place food happened. This is not nostalgia. There's a physiological reason it matters. Eating in front of a screen activates a mild but real alertness response. The same low-level stress state the screen is designed to keep you in. That alertness keeps cortisol slightly elevated during the entire meal. Cortisol elevated during a meal means your body is partly in stress mode while it decides what to do with the food you just gave it. And distracted eating also bypasses your satiety signals, so you eat more, and then the overeating triggers its own cortisol spike. She did not eat alone in front of the television. The table was not a rule. It was just where life happened. The sixth habit began in the morning, in a small cup. The women I grew up around drank green tea, 2 or 3 cups a day without thinking much about it, not as a wellness practice. Not because they had read about it, because it was what was drunk. Green tea contains an amino acid called L-theanine, which does something quite specific. It produces calm, clear alertness without the cortisol spike that comes with high caffeine drinks. Compare that to the large, sweet coffee drinks that have become the default morning ritual for millions of women. Those can average 450 calories, and they deliver both the caffeine and the cortisol activation that comes with it. She did not switch to green tea for her stress levels. She never left it. That is the difference between a habit and a trend. The 7th habit was invisible because it was structural. In traditional Japanese households, meals happened at the same time every day. Breakfast at the same hour. Dinner at the same hour. Without exception, without negotiation, without the kind of irregular eating that has become completely normal in modern life. Skipping breakfast, eating lunch at 2 or 4, having dinner at 9 or 10 at night. What most people do not know is that the body's cortisol rhythm is partly anchored to when it expects food. When food arrives unpredictably, the body stays in a mild, chronic state of survival alertness. Cortisol stays elevated. Fat storage continues. The clock on the wall of my grandmother's kitchen was the most effective cortisol management program I have ever encountered. Nobody gave it a name. Nobody needed to. The 8th habit was in the bowl that appeared at breakfast and sometimes at dinner, too. Miso soup, natto, tsukemono, the small pickled vegetables served alongside a meal. Fermented foods were not a trend in the homes I grew up around. They were simply part of how Japanese people ate every day without interruption. And what researchers have since discovered is that this daily fermented food habit feeds a gut microbiome so diverse that it measurably reduces the inflammatory signals, the cytokines, that amplify the stress response. A Stanford University study published in Cell followed participants through a 10-week fermented food intervention and found increased microbiome diversity and a reduction in 19 different inflammatory markers, including interleukin-6. The gut and the brain speak to each other constantly. A gut that is not inflamed gives cortisol less to work with. Her miso soup was not medicine. It was breakfast. It was also, without her knowing, one of the most powerful anti-stress practices in her day. The 9th habit was in the floor itself. In a traditional Japanese home, you spend time close to the ground. You lower yourself to sit for meals, for tea, for conversation. You rise again. You do this many times a day. Sitting in seiza or cross-legged or simply near the floor engages deep postural muscles, and in doing so, naturally slows your breathing rate. Slower, deeper breathing is not just a feeling of calm. It directly activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the system responsible for bringing cortisol down. The architecture of the house was regulating the nervous system without anyone asking it to. The chair, by comparison, encourages a posture that keeps the chest slightly compressed and the breath shallow. Shallow breathing is the breathing of mild alert. The body does not know you are just sitting at a desk. It reads the breath and it responds accordingly. 9 habits, none of them expensive, none of them requiring a product, a program, or a gym. A walk through trees, a hot bath before bed, a sense of purpose you tend to the way you tend a garden, 4 words at the table, sitting with your family and putting the screens away, a small cup of green tea in the morning, meals at the same time every day, a bowl of miso or a few bites of something fermented, and a little time each day close to the ground. I am 61 years old. I have never been on a diet. I have never owned a gym membership. These 9 habits are not things I adopted. They are things I was raised inside of. And the older I get, the more clearly I can see what they were doing, what they were quietly, steadily protecting. Start with one thing tonight: the bath, the tea, the table. One thing is enough. One thing done every night becomes a life.